On March 21, 1960, more than 300 people had gathered peacefully at the Sharpville police station to hand in their passbooks. They were responding to a call by Mangaliso Sobukwe, the president of the Pan-African Congress, better known as the PAC, who had called on Africans in South Africa to come out in a nationwide protest against the pass laws. The passbook, or Dompas, as it came to be known, was one of the most hateful instruments that the apartheid government introduced to control the lives and movement of African people.
Ndingumama uNombeko Mpisi. Ulwazi lwami endinalo ngepassbook. Sikhuleke thina kusithiwa iDompas kuba izinto ezazisenzeka ngoko zazinobudomu phakathi. Yiyo ke lonto engamandla okubi kakhulu ngayo yayilento ukuba kufuneka uyithwele wehle wenyuka nayo eneneni kwakufanele nobulele ulele nayo kuba kwakungomzuzu nomzuzu amabhulu ayinokufika afika akuvuse ngokulele kuthi kanti ayikho kuwe esiqwini. Nanso into yayihlukumeza kakhulu ngeDompas ekuthiwa ke ipassbook ngoku. Ukuhlukumezeka ewe ndingatsho ndithi ndihlukumezekile kodwa kuba yenzeka ngexesha ndingekabikho mna. Azange ndihlukumezeke mna personally kodwa ndabanako ukuhlukumezeka xa ndisiva izinto ezazisenzeka ebantwini ngelo xesha. Ucinga into uba yenzeka ngeli xesha lethu ngeba ndandenze ntoni. Ukuhlukumezeka kona sahlukumezeka kangangokuba naxa kubizwa igama lika-apartheid uve uba uphatheka kakubi uba izinto ezazingeke zenzeke ngeli xesha lethu kodwa ke zenzeka uba sasingenamandla.
The protest at the Sharpville police station was peaceful, but that was until the police opened fire with live ammunition on the peaceful demonstrators and brutally killed 69 people. Scores of others were wounded. The horrific scenes of men, women, and children who were shot with live ammunition by the apartheid police force received wide-scale international media attention. In South Africa, on the other hand, the tragic incident received scant attention from an apartheid-centered media. In townships across South Africa, protests flared up against the pass laws and against the harsh brutality meted out by the police at the Shabvil Massacre. On the 8th of April, Prime Minister Hendrik Verwoerd, considered to be the architect of apartheid, came down with an even harsher force by declaring a nation state of emergency to silence resistance against the oppressive state. The two leading liberation forces at the time, the African National Congress and the Pan-African Congress, were banned. Despite the state's heavy-handed clampdown on political resistance, 21 March 1960 was firmly established in South Africa's growing resistance movement against the apartheid state as a day of commemoration of the Sharpville Massacre.
My name is Nozuko Mgonyama. The Sharpville Massacre is an incident that occurred on the 21st of March 1960, whereby all South Africans that are not white were denied their rights and freedom in the name of apartheid.
I am Mrs. Nomonde Mazongolo Gaju. My understanding about Shabvil Massacre, it was one of the first and most violent demonstrations against apartheid in South Africa, which police fired a crowd of black people, killing and wounding 250 of them. Thank you.
21 March became a significant way to invoke the spirits of the 69 people who were killed on that fateful day. The lives of the 69 people were also memorialized in artworks, poems, and songs that continued to inspire South Africa's liberation struggle. Dennis Brutus's harrowing poem has survived through time as a stark reminder of what makes Human Rights Day such an important day of reflection.
A poem about Sharpville. What is important about Sharpville is not that 70 died, nor even that they were shot in the back, retreating, unarmed, defenseless, and certainly not the heavy caliber slug that tore through a mother's back and ripped through the child in her arms, killing it. Remember Sharpville, bullet in the back day. Because it epitomized oppression and the nature of society more clearly than anything else. It was the classic event. Nowhere is racial dominance more clearly defined. Nowhere the will to oppress more clearly demonstrated. But the world whispers. Apartheid, with snarling guns, the bloodlust after South Africa spills into dust. Remember Sharpville. Remember bullet in the back day. And remember the unquenchable will for freedom. Remember the dead and be glad.
Whilst the blood of the 69 people killed by apartheid's police forces seeped into the ground and their souls rose to the hereafter, the voices of the artists from across South Africa continued to resonate loudly to express the tragic horror of the day. 6 years later, on 21 March 1966, the General Assembly of the United Nations called on the global community to double its efforts to eliminate all forms of racism. In a special resolution that was a slap in the face of the apartheid government, 21 March was declared as the UN's International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. In 1994, after South Africa's first democratic elections, Sharpville Day was officially declared as South Africa's Human Rights Day. In 1996, more than 30 years after the Shabvil Massacre, South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission found that the police had deliberately fired on an unarmed crowd. In 1996, President Mandela, in a statement on Human Rights Day, said, 21 March is South African Human Rights Day. It is a day which, more than many others, captures the essence of the struggle of the South African people and the soul of our non-racial democracy. March 21 is the day on which we remember and sing praises to those who perished in the name of democracy and human dignity. It is also a day on which we reflect and assess the progress we are making in enshrining basic human rights and values.
My name is Siyambonga Mtubeki. I was obviously not born at that time, but from what I've gathered through history and through reading is that it was one of the saddest days in South Africa, where on the 21st of March 1960, a group of black people marched to a police station in a black township somewhere in Sharpville. It was called the Transvaal back then. And it is said that the protesters got violent and they started throwing stones, which I don't know how true it is. And then that's how the police fired shots, killing about 69 people, with more than 100 people injured, I think. That's as far as I can remember about the day.
Hi, my name is Andison Zimande, and I was given the question, what do I know about Sharpville Day? Well, I don't know much, but what I know about Sharpville Day is that it's a national day for the elimination of racial discrimination, and it's on the 21st of March, and it is now known as Human Rights Day. Isukela Shabvil Massacre, which happened at Sharpville ngo-1960, March 21, where people were protesting against their rights. They were actually fighting for equality, human human dignity, freedom of speech and freedom of movement, expression of language and culture, and also their life. And on that day, 69 people were killed by the police. And I don't know much, that's all I know. So, yeah.
On December 10, 1996, the South African Constitution was signed in Sharpville by President Nelson Mandela. 27 years into a new democracy, Human Rights Month in South Africa now resonates with both painful memories about the Shabvil Massacre and also with disappointment, anger, and a deep sense that political leadership in South Africa has betrayed the ultimate sacrifices of South Africa's political martyrs. Artists in South Africa have used their voices and creativity to record and comment on the past and our present realities. When the acclaimed play Woza Albert was reprised in March 2019, the CEO of the South African State Theatre, Dr. Sibongiseni Mkhize, commented,
Even in the current democratic climate, the question that was asked by Ngema and Mtwa during the days of apartheid is still relevant. There is a lot going on in our maturing democracy, which arguably makes those who died with the revolutionary sword to turn in their rested graves. Constant contestation over the meaning and direction of the new South Africa's socio-economic and political dispensation, the debilitating effects of corruption and relentless economic inequalities are some of the things that perhaps await the second coming of Morena.
Woza Albert premiered 4 decades ago and has been hailed as one of the best plays to ever be scripted in theatre worldwide. At the height of apartheid, the celebrated production that toured the world during the late 1970s and 1980s played a major role in raising awareness and global support for the anti-apartheid struggle. An equally celebrated play of the 70s and 80s was Watinta Bafazi, Watinta Mbogoto, You Strike a Woman, You Strike a Rock. The play, produced by Smalin Daba and Phyllis Klotz, was a testimony of the resilience of black women in the political struggle.
At a time when media censorship was at its most brutal in South Africa during the 80s, Phyllis Klotz's production of Watinta Bafazi, Watinta Mbogoto, You Strike the Women, You Strike the Rock, was staged to raise awareness about the conditions and the struggles of black women in South Africa. The title for the play, about these 3 women who live and work in a Cape Town township, trying to eke out a living in a racially, socially and economically unequal world, was inspired by the 1956 slogan of the South African Women's March against apartheid laws. The play's themes around gender activism and the need for gender parity remains as true today as it did when it was first staged. The play is a powerful archive of the dehumanizing conditions of society and the struggles of black women in South Africa during apartheid.
Many more plays were created during the 70s and 80s about women's resistance, and in particular about the historic 1956 Women's March in Pretoria, led by Lillian Ngoyi, Amina Gachalia, Helen Joseph and Sophie de Beer. Sunnyboy Mutao's dance production, We Are Still Marching, was originally created in 2016 to honor stalwarts of the women's struggle such as Lillian Ngoyi, Helen Joseph, Rahima Musa, Sophia Williams de Bruyn, Motlalephula Chabaku, Berta Qoa and Albertina Sisulu, who led the 1956 march of 20,000 women to the Union buildings in Pretoria to protest against the pass laws. We Are Marching was recently reprised because the piece also explores the struggles faced by women in southern Africa from the apartheid era until present day. Whilst the production is a reminder of incidents such as Women's March of 1956 and the bus boycott, it is also powerful commentary on the recent mass campaigns #Fees Must Fall, #MeToo, and #The Total Shutdown. Plus the fact that even 27 years after the first democratic elections in South Africa, the struggle continues and women are still marching.
Hello, my name is Sunny Boy Mandla Mutau. I'm the choreographer of the production called We Are Still Marching, which was firstly commissioned by the Playhouse, or it was commissioned by the Playhouse and performed by the MID company, which is moving into dance into Johannesburg. So it's a collaboration between the two companies. It was created in 2017. Yeah, 2017. So the aim was to create a work that celebrates women in South Africa and around the world, or neighboring countries. And we looked for themes or stories that we can touch base, and we found that there isn't much that was or that has been said about the women within the who were involved within the apartheid era, or women in struggle, or women who took a stand. And we said, no, let's just create a piece that will celebrate and honor what they've done, dating from the first Women's March in 1956, where we found the Lillian Gowes, the Helen Joseph, the Magdalene Motsoaledi, who took a stand to fight against to fight against the past law system. And we said, okay, so that it doesn't stay in one tip, but we looked at all the other events, or all the other struggles, or taking a stand, or the motions that were taken, even in the past boycotts, the 1976 march. There is nothing that is, or there wasn't a production that speaks of that. So we created this work in honor and to celebrate and say, we see that women are there in our world, and women are now, have been there taking a stand, but we've turned some sort of a blind eye. We were not acknowledging enough. So hence we try and involve the Me Too motion that has recently happened, the Fees Must Fall March, which also was led by women. So we saw all these events, when they take place, there's a minimal acknowledgement, there's minimal support or honor in all these motions to change the world. And so we created this work as a vehicle to share the history of what has happened in the past and what is currently happening. So it's like the history is repeating itself, but in different events. So in We Are Still Marching, we use a lot of videography, we use a lot of props, just to enhance, or just to make sure to give our audience an experience.
In April 2017, rage engulfed Colony, a small town in the Northwest Province, as protesters believed that the killing of teenager Mahlomola Mashau was racially motivated. The two white males accused of his murder were found guilty in November 2018 by the Northwest High Court, where one was sentenced to 18 years and the other for 23 years in prison. After appealing, the Supreme Court of Appeal acquitted the men in November the following year.
Eyes nearly popping out of his face from what seems like shock. He doesn't piss about the bush, he aims for the pit. Makwete, place of lumps of soil, our town, a town that sleeps with.
Drawing on real-life events for inspiration, Standard Bank young artist Mochabi Vice Monageng's play The Red on the Rainbow, produced by the South African State Theatre, follows the aftermath of the death of a young man in Colony killed on a maize farm at the hands of a farmer's son and his friends. The play explores how time seems to remain frozen, picture style, in an unending apartheid ghost dance.
The Rainbow, what a beautiful piece of theatre. Theatre redefined, redesigned, reimagined. Beautiful piece by Vice Mochabi. the aesthetics, exceptional. Seeing the aesthetics being utilized in that manner. The use of song, the use of movement, the use of text, the way it's written. But also the text in terms of the story that it carries. The story that speaks to who we are as Black people. The story that does not only just speak to who we are, but also edifies who we are. Writing these characters who are complex, but at the end of the day, they find some kind of success. And I think for me that was really beautiful. Seeing also elements of how ritual theatre was used in the piece. Very exceptional piece of theatre.
Mr. President, written by Bongani Nicholas Ngomane and directed by Chapang Motiko and Dr. Karina Lema, is a postmodern style composition that exhibits still and moving images to illustrate the conditions that suppress the mindset of a Bantu-based Kaslam. Through an installation, pictures, embodiment, sound, and the voice, a collage is used to create an abstract image of the mindset that reflects the reality of a Bantu-based Kaslam. To achieve this, it puzzles together the reality of the people from marginalized areas of South Africa to create a museum and to disclose the invisible faith in democracy towards a Bantu-based Kaslam.
Hi, my name is Bongani Nicholas Ngomane. I'm a practitioner researcher for Mr. President. What inspired this work is that when I came back after doing my baccalaureate degree, BTech, at TUT, I had to start afresh as a graduate, and I saw how many graduates were sitting at home. I saw nothing has changed in the township. I saw people still suffering even more. It's like we have moved. I felt like we have moved from the apartheid oppression to suppression democracy, because things were getting worse and worse. But every 5 years, we've got people who come and promise people houses, basic needs, and so on, as their constitutional right, as the South African Constitution states it. But none of that happens, and every 5 years they come back. Now we are at our 8 years of democracy, but people are getting poorer and poorer. The rich are getting more richer, but the people of the township are not going anywhere. Even if they can study, they go back in their homes, they drink alcohol, they do drugs. There's no service delivery. That's not proper place for people that to stay there, and so on. And they're given grant money for as little as 350. So this production was inspired by that. The message that I wanted people to know, I do not have a specific message, but the production aimed to problematize. The production aims to show the realities of people, on how people do things, and what are the realities of people in everyday, on a daily basis, and what their situation looks like. Not necessarily sending a message, but it's a reflection on how the people of Ivory Park live. And of course, this was also motivated by my coursework and the courses that I've attended at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, at VETS, Drama for Life, and all those came together, and I put everything together to create this masterpiece of work.
In May 2021, the Center for Creative Arts at the University of KwaZulu-Natal launched the inaugural Artfluence Human Rights Festival to celebrate artists who use their voices to advance a culture of human rights and to defend those whose voices still remain on the margin. Human rights activist Yusra Badin was appointed as the festival's inaugural curator. Badin has a long history of social activism and played a pivotal role in enforcing the Marcus Theatre Foundation to review its sexual harassment policy.
A human rights arts festival is a necessary festival. We often think that human rights is the domain of lawyers, activists, and policymakers. However, cultural workers are a key part of this ecology, activists in their own right, who played a fundamental role in shifting South Africa during the 1980s and throughout apartheid. The Artfluence Festival allows artists to bring together not only their practice, but the way that they bring together their voices to shift global issues. This festival brings together artists from South Africa, the continent, and around the world. Where human rights is the call, arts is the response. Being the curator of Artfluence 2022 gave me the opportunity and absolute pleasure of bringing together artists not only from one discipline but from multi-disciplines and multiple locations to bring them together into a conversation to talk about global issues, to look at these conversations from a local, national, continental and international perspective is incredibly important at this time where we face huge uncertainties for wars we never expected and pandemics we never dreamed of in our lifetimes. Arts are not tools for social change. Arts is social change. Arts for art's sake pushes us to have conversations, to think, to consider, to define meaning, particularly in times with huge confusion. These conversations at Artfluence are incredibly important and help make sense of the world around us. It has been an absolute pleasure for me to bring these people together as their work is critically important and discusses national, international, and global issues pertinently, poignantly, and beautifully. I hope you enjoy them. When I worked at a major theatre a few years ago, a man was found guilty of sexual harassment. He was allowed to continue his current project, allow it to finish, and then he was to be banned from the premises for 2 years. Around the same time, there was a special event held by the chairman of the theatre, inviting his most prominent guests, funders, and so forth. And it was the most prestigious event that the theatre held. That very night, the sexual predator arrived. He arrived at the guest entrance. He was not on the list, he was not invited, and he shook hands with the senior management and then made his way into the event. He made his way into the event with the guests and funders and other esteemed individuals, mingled, ate the food, the good catering that comes with chairman's events, and then proceeded to sit amongst these guests to watch that evening's performance. It was infuriating to see this, because this man was showing us that he would not be stopped. He was deliberately breaking the ban that was imposed on him by taking advantage of a formal evening where most management members were afraid to make a scene, were afraid to speak up. And this is exactly what this festival is about. Speak up. Disrupt. Don't let societal norms allow a predator to sit among your family and your friends.
Opera singer Shabvil Gomer was awarded the inaugural Artfluence Human Rights Award in recognition for her activism to ensure that artists whose livelihoods had been affected by the national lockdowns receive support.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Gomer. I'm an artist, an activist, a teacher, a parent. And what does it mean to me as an artist to win a Human Rights Award? What it means to me is that essentially then the work of the artist is being done. Because what is the work of the artist? The work of the artist is to be the conscience of a nation. And the conscience of a nation needs to be pricked when human rights are being violated. So once you start getting acknowledgement of the fact that you are doing good work in the space of human rights, then it means the voice of the artist is actually doing its job. And it means somebody notices that that gap is essentially being filled. So I'm honored, I'm privileged, and I feel validated by winning the Human Rights Award for 2021. Why is it important for artists to be defenders of human rights? It's important because artists have a voice, whether it's through whichever form of art they perform or they engage in. They have a voice. If you dance and you're telling a story, you actually have a voice through dance to tell a story. Through poetry, visual arts, whatever it is, music, film. When you have that voice, it becomes important to be very cognizant of how you use that voice. You can't just be making noise or using it for other things other than what is necessary, especially at a time when people don't seem to have a voice and people feel like they're not being heard. So artists really need to use their voice to defend human rights because it's a voice that is already there, and so you need to occupy that space by not squandering the opportunity.
The 2022 Artfluence Human Rights Festival will take place from the 3rd to the 8th of May 2022. The Center for Creative Arts Director Ismail Mohammed says that supporting the voices of artists who are human rights defenders is healthy for sustaining South Africa's democracy.
South African theatre makers have a long and proud legacy of being defenders of human rights. From iconic playwrights like Mavis Taylor, Barney Simon, Small Ndaba, Phyllis Klotz, Gibson Kente, Maisha Maponia, Walter Chikela and John Ledwaba, to a younger generation of playmakers like Mpile Molusi, Neil Coppen, Pilisiwa Twenstra, Menzi Makwane, Napo Mashiani, and hundreds more, the quest for a just society, free expression, and dignity for all still underlines our work in South Africa.
In theatre, documentary film, and radio for the past 2 decades, focusing on socio-political issues across the continent. Her area of expertise is using personal testimony in theatre for social change.
My name is Bobby Rodwell, and I use personal testimony in theatre for social change. The reason I do this is that I believe that theatre is a tremendously powerful space for social change. And all the work that I do is socio-political and is based on personal testimony around stories from this continent. The reason I use personal testimony is I became more and more incensed by listening to stories about people in a state of migration, in political situations, told through the eyes of the savior or the journalist or the NGO worker. And I felt that people ought to tell their own stories. And I was very interested in trying to create authenticity of voice by using personal testimony. The first time I used personal testimony was in a play called The Story I'm About to Tell, where people wrote and told their own stories on stage. Another example of using personal testimony was in a play called Frontiers, where 4 people who are refugees in South Africa told their stories to me. They did not go on stage for obvious reasons, and their stories were told by actors. In that case, we always have what we call a ceremony, where the person who owns the story hands over permission to tell the story to the actor. That, of course, is very useful to the actor too. Now, there are very big ethical questions around using personal testimony, and one has to be very careful around permission. First of all, when people tell me their stories, the story might be told in 2 to 3 hours. I'm using 10 to 15 minutes of that story. So I will take the story. I never change the words of the story. They are told in the authentic voice of the person. but I will have to edit the story down. I then take the story back to the person to sign off permission. And then if the person would like to be involved in the duration of the production, they are. So the production becomes sort of a project that we're all involved in. And hopefully it leads to people reconsidering some of the positions that they have. So that is why I use personal testimony in theatre for social change.
Poetry Africa, presented by the Center for Creative Arts, is a dynamic platform for spoken word artists. Curated by Spindile Shlongwa, the festival provides an uncensored platform for poets whose voices resonate with several hashtag protest movements. In 2021, Spindile worked with arts journalist Tracy Saunders and Center for Creative Arts Director Ismail Mohammed to produce an anthology of poems titled Hashtag Poetry to record the voices of 25 South African poets whose poems are anthems for human rights.
Last year, the Poetry Africa Festival celebrated its 25th anniversary. We then went into our archives to identify poets and whose work is advocating for social change. The hashtag movement occupied center stage on social media that forced each and every one of us to respond to the call for change and justice, and it is the catalyst for the hashtag Poetry Anthology. The anthology features 25 South African women poets whose voices calls us to action to fight against gender-based violence, corruption, xenophobia, just to name a few. This collection is a reminder that poets and wordsmiths may seed social justice in hashtags and slogans, but it is all of us who are called to reap the harvest in action and with deeds.
Given that the hashtag has become a clarion call for protesters all over the globe in recent years, the production of a poetry volume that's available in printed form takes it out of the realms of social media and makes it accessible to everybody, so everyone can access the poetry and read and see what young people are talking and thinking about and what the world means to them.
The apartheid government feared freedom of expression and freedom of creativity. The apartheid state forced controlled thinking and censorship in multiple ways. The apartheid state failed to see that the relationship between human rights and the arts is so tightly interwoven. Section 16 of the South African Constitution guarantees freedom of expression and freedom of creativity.
And I was asked a question asking, why do I think freedom of creativity and freedom of expression is an essentially human right? And in my opinion, I think it really helps. Like, abantu abaningi, they'll be battling with ama mental issues, abanye just life issues nje ewodwa. Abanye, they are going through depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and through creativity they keep going. Abanye, they listen to music, poems, they watch movies of with characters that went through izimo that are facing at that moment. Abanye, they be going for ama nature photographies, like umuntu ahambe emahlathini eyoshuta khona emadamini and all that, and through all that they heal.
South Africa is 27 years into a new democracy, but the majority of schools in South Africa still do not have an arts education. Asitej SA is a leading organization that is actively campaigning for all young children to have access to the arts as a human right.
My name is Yvette Hardy and I'm the director of Asitej South Africa. And I believe strongly that it is a child's basic right to have access to the arts. I believe this for a number of reasons. One of those is that the International UN Convention on the Rights of the Child articulates this right in two articles, Article 13 and Article 31. And these articles speak to a child's right to play, leisure, and access to the arts, as well as the right to participate in and have a cultural voice themselves. Our children are not just the future, although they are certainly that, but they are also very much the present. And in order for them to be whole human beings that are able to engage with the world around them critically, creatively, and with compassion, they need to have access to the arts. They need to be able to use all the multiple intelligences that children have through artistic experience. The wonderful thing about the arts is that it uses every part of what it means to be human. It uses our minds, our bodies, our emotions, our energies, our intellect, and our ways of seeing and moving and being in the world. It uses our senses.
The Constitution Court's former Justice Albie Sachs is an active advocate for the arts. It is through his efforts that artworks filter throughout the Constitution Court building in Johannesburg. The questions that we at the Artfluence Democracy Dialogues wish to ask are, without giving young people an arts-based education, how then do we nurture a culture of creativity and free expression that can be a defender of human rights? But more so, if we do not create the space for stories to be told that critically reflect on our past, interrogate our present times, and re-envision our futures, what are the chances that the meaning behind human rights and the sacrifices of the martyrs of the Sharpville Massacre could be lost to future generations? What are the chances that Human Rights Month in South Africa could become so diluted that it loses its essence? If we diminish the values that we place on our democracy, what are the chances that we would be compromising and losing grip of our hard-earned democracy?